Okay, lastly, Steve and I hiked down to, good afternoon, we welcome you to. Yeah. Our council work session this afternoon, Tuesday, June 3rd at 1:30 p.m. We'll begin with a roll call, starting with Councillor Bogdan.
Becky Bogdan.
Gary Garrett.
Rachel Whipple.
George Handley. And Craig Christensen. I believe we have Councillor McKay and Councillor Hoban online.
Travis Hoban's here.
Great, welcome to you also. We excuse Mayor Kafusi, who's off on personal business today, and welcome others from the administration here. It's proposed that we approve the minutes listed on your agenda, the May 6th council meeting minutes and the May 20th work meeting and council meeting minutes. Are there any questions or changes, recommended changes to these minutes? If not, we'll declare those minutes approved by unanimous consent. Our first item on the agenda today is a discussion regarding water rates, and our policy analyst Malia Daly will kick off this discussion.
Okay, I will present for hopefully under just 3 or 4 minutes. So we have time for discussion. This was sent out in the packet, so all I'm going to do today is just review kind of the 4 options that are on the table to this point. As always, we can have more amended options or other kind of versions of this as the council sees fit. But these are the ones, the first 2 we've discussed before. So the 2.5 revenue increase with the tiers, all of them have the 3 tiers. This is the one that's currently proposed in the budget. Option 2 is the one that was proposed before the tentative budget. So that 5% revenue increase with the different tier numbers there. And then option 3 and 4 are ones that over the last couple of weeks, staff has worked with Public Works and Bowen and Collins to come up with based on counselor kind of discussions. So option 3 and 4, 3 is just, as it says there, equal dollar rate increases between each tier. So they each go up by the same dollar amount, which then ends up being a 3.3% revenue increase. And then option 4 is still getting to the 5% revenue increase, but then the tiers are proportional to the tiers as presented here in option 1. So I'll just kind of go as part of looking at these options. There was another question by counselors because we had originally discussed kind of what that would look like for then rates in the following years to get us up to the recommended funding, capital funding budget for Public Works. So based on the different options and what we set as the revenue increase for this year, then these are the recommended rate increase alternatives as presented by Bowen and Collins. So this was way back when we were talking about the 12%. Here's where those rate increases for the next years, and then here's what those would look like. That doesn't mean we're adopting a whole schedule for all the years. It's just what they would recommend then doing for the next couple of years after that, several years
Kind of
after
a
that.
projected.
Yeah, projected what we would need to do for rate increases if the goal was to get to what they projected as the needed capital funding. Another question from counselors. This is based on all the options, what percentage of users would then see a bill increase, an annual bill increase? So this is less than a 2% annual bill increase. And then based on the option, this is how many users would see a bill increase by that much. So this is just broken out by all of those options there. And that's, I have the other slides that we had talked about before with the 2.5 and the 5%, if we want to review those. But I'm just gonna head back to this screen here and we can discuss here. Keith and Rochelle are both on Zoom. If we have any other questions for them, Public Works is here as well. But today's goal is to get to a motion on one of these options or a different option that we can put in the budget ordinance So then we can vote on that for June 17th when we need to pass the budget. So that's the goal today. If that doesn't happen, that's okay. We can do it on June 17th, but it'll be a little just a bit more hectic for staff, but that's totally fine. We can do that as well. But we would prefer if we could get to a motion today on one of these four.
Can you advance to your next, to
This one?
Let's see, one more slide.
Yes.
This one. Yeah, I hadn't. Questions for Malia?
Do we have any perspective from staff or from Keith about the cost of service that's reflected in these different options? Obviously, option 2 is the one that Keith had proposed, so I assume that's the one that he feels most accurately captures cost of service, but I'd be curious to know. I'm assuming that options 1, 3, and 4 were more guided by a concern for keeping the steep climb of the tiers as minimal as possible, but I don't know how that gets evaluated from the point of view of cost of service. So I'd be curious to know what their perspective on that is.
So I'll go ahead and answer that. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, from an AWWA cost of service perspective, option 2 aligns the cost most closely with the impact on the system. As we've talked in times past, I think the other options do represent a way to transition to that over time and could be viewed as good interim steps. In the long term, my recommendation, though, would be to move toward the ratios as identified in option 2.
Is there any legal concern when you say AWWA standards? I know they're invoked in the new state law. Is there any legal concern with any of the other 3 options in terms of being accused of not meeting those standards?
I'm not an attorney, so I don't want this to be perceived as legal advice, but I don't know that any of us know exactly how this this regulation is going to be interpreted. I would suggest, though, that moving in the direction with a plan to ultimately get to cost of service ratios would meet the intent of the legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Councilor Handley. Other questions for Malia? Clarifications, or would anyone care to? Do you have enough information to make a motion?
I have a question.
Okay.
So this is going off of George's question about the cost of service, and Keith said moving towards those kind of ratios that we have in the option 2. So does that mean if we choose something other than option 2, in future years, we would need to kind of increase the spread between tier 2 and tier 3 until we get to something that accurately reflects the cost of service?
That would be my recommendation for you, is to gradually move towards option 2. Now, I can tell you that cost of service does change with water use patterns. So you will want to look at this again in 5 years. If things have flattened out a little bit, the ratios might be a little bit different. But in general, to be most defensible, that would be my recommendation, is to gradually shift to that approach.
So that would mean that if we were to do like the mayor's latest proposal, option 1, that in subsequent years, that difference between tier 2 and tier 3 would need to increase more, even as we're increasing the total amount of revenue So tier 3 would get disproportionately higher increases in future years than tier 1 and tier 2. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, that you would put more of the increase onto that upper tier in future years. I I will just make the observation, though, that does give customers a chance to adjust some of their water use patterns, understand the impacts that they are incurring, both from their pocketbook and on the system, and perhaps phasing it in gives some time for adjustment.
So it would minimize, then potentially would minimize the need, depending on how they adjust their water patterns. Counselor Hanley?
Well, I'll make a motion. I have preferred all along option 2. I don't think the votes are there for option 2. I think we have to be very careful about any of the other options for the reasons that have just been mentioned. I think next year is going to be a painful year. And I would rather get the tiered structure reflecting accurate cost of service now than later. I'm not going to be on the council in a year, so that's not my burden to carry. But I'm happy to carry that burden now. But I recognize that there are not, as far as I can tell, the votes for option 2. I think option 1 puts us too far behind. Just what Rachel was mentioning, I mean, to go from 2.5% to 6.5% next year, and then recognizing that the tiers don't accurately reflect cost of service, means that upper tier is going to be hit especially hard next year. So it seems to me that if you could go back to the, it seems to me that an option 4, to my mind, just simply is too flat for the again, for cost of service. I don't really, I mean, I'm looking at an 83 cent difference between tier 3 for options 2 and 3. So that gives me some idea, based on what I understand cost of service reflects, that's
72 cents.
72. I'm counting 83, but from 2.81 to 3.64.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. But that, as I understood it from what Keith explained, that does reflect a difference in cost of service. So that's something that's going to have to be made up over the longer term. Anyway, that's a long way of saying I would make a motion that we adopt option 3, that we put it into the budget for 2 weeks.
Option 2
As much
or
as I
option 3?
wish we could go.
George, are you saying 2 or 3?
You don't want to do a vote on 2 first?
We can do a vote on 2 first. I don't think they're there, but
You decide.
I get to decide.
You're the mover. Go ahead and take it.
I'm just trying to strike a compromise. I don't want to fight this anymore.
Just ask, I think aligning to cost of service makes sense. My sense is that some progression there makes sense. So I personally I think option 3 comes closer. And yes, we will have to continue to address that cost of service, and people also have time to adjust behaviors as well. So I think there's some value there. So from my perspective, there's not an issue with cost of service. It's how quickly we get there, allowing people to adjust to that.
Well, and I agree that 3.3 revenue is better than 2.5. I mean, we've been raising revenue 5% every year, so it doesn't sit well with me to go backwards on that when we're needing to go forwards. But at least that way, we get the 3 tiers in place, and those 3 tiers are a little steeper and more reflective of cost of service than the other options 1 and 4. So that's why I would be willing to make that compromise. So yes, I will move that we adopt option 3.
Okay.
Do we option which?
3.
3, I would say.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt option 3 as the recommended rate increase and tiered structure for the fiscal year 2025-26 budget. And with a second by Counselor Christensen. Any council discussion? Counselor Bogdan?
I just want to bring up a point. What I'm seeing with some of this tier 3 stuff are orchards and things that used to have irrigation that don't anymore. And irrigation is one thing that you need in order to have urban farming recognition by the county. You can go from 1 acre to 5 acre, well, 4.99 acres, because once you hit 5 acres, that's green belt. And so some of the things that I'm hearing in conversation is, why are we punishing farmers with water and with taxes? And to me, if you're coming down from 5 acres to 1 acre, I would much rather see you stay on your irrigation and go to the county and get the urban farming status where you have a break on your taxes. And then if you have to use that money that you would have paid for taxes towards fixing your irrigation system, whatever that means, if that's redoing your ditches, redoing your pump, redoing whatever, to me, that helps preserve some of this farming. And I don't want to incentivize them to come and use more expensive water. That's not the way Provo was set up. And in my mind, that's not what culinary water is supposed to be used for. Irrigation water, we're hearing from these people from these orchards, even when they come down, because of the cost of it, they have to decrease their water usage. I would much rather have them have the water that they need on the orchards that they need, on the plants that they need, on the gardens that they need, and get those tax breaks from the county to preserve agriculture in the future. So I wouldn't want tier 3 to go down.
Great, thank you, Counselor Bogdan. Any other comment?
I have a comment.
Yes. Counselor.
Yes, so I would really be strongly in favor of option 2. I've already spoken to this in a couple of public meetings. And as George said, I don't think that the budget situation, our revenue situation, is going to look better next year as a big picture than it does this year. And so knowing that by choosing not to do a 5% increase this year, we're going to have to do 6 or 6.5 next year instead of a 5% next year. I don't love that. And even if we tell people now, okay, it's only 2.5 or 3.3% this year, so like save extra money for that next year. That's not how people do their budgets or anything. So I don't like that we'll have to have a higher increase next year. I was happy to see the charts that show that once we hit year 2028, we expect, about the same increases no matter what scenario that we're in. So it's helpful to see that we hope to get this leveled out in 2 or 3 years. So that's good. I guess it was actually my idea to create option 3, so. So there's that too.
There is that.
There is that. This is what I get for offering compromises, then I have to take my compromise, right? That is like the judges I've heard from you, George.
I didn't mean it.
But since I can count 3 and 4 just like everyone else can, I will recognize that I cannot win on option 2, and I'll support option 3.
Any other council discussion? All right, we'll call for a vote on supporting option 3. Counselor Bogdan.
Yes.
Counselor Garrett, yes. Counselor Whipple.
Yes.
Counselor Hanley.
Yes.
Counselor Christensen.
Yes.
Counselor McKay.
Still there.
I had stuff I wanted to say, but I'm in the middle of having to do something that I can't get out of.
Okay.
Just say no, because I don't have time to explain things.
Okay, you're welcome to make a comment, Counselor McKay, if you'd like to do that with your vote.
I think she said she's in the middle of something.
Okay. Counselor Hoban?
To no surprise, no.
Okay, so that motion passes by a vote of 5-2. Thank you. All right, we'll move to,
Before we
yes,
move on, I wanted to ask about the status for the urban farming or gardening exemption that Public Works had been working on before. I still want to see something like that coming into play with that. And I wanted to know if they've been able to continue to do revisions and work on that and when that can come to the council for discussion.
Yes, we're working on that and Gordon Hay, Public Works. So yes, we are working on that and we will bring that back to you with this budget. After this budget, we'll have that exemption for you to adopt. And it'll be similar like what we talked about. So I think it will be acceptable for 5 acres down to smaller lots that use a large portion of the lot. So we're going to be very flexible to have that go forward that way.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm sensitive about keeping irrigation.
Yeah, the city doesn't control that. The people that have lost irrigation did that voluntarily on their own. So it wasn't a city derived thing. It was people chose to sell or get rid of it. As they've done that, that's been their choices. I don't know, we can force them to keep it, but
can they get it back?
No.
once they give it up, resell it, they lose it.
Mess of pottage.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. Next, we have a presentation regarding fiscal year 26 tentative budget amendments presented by budget analyst Andrea Wright. Hi, Andrea, welcome.
Hi, sorry, just letting everybody out the door. So every year we go ahead and present the changes that we have to the tentative budget after it's been presented to you guys. Every year we have corrections or changes and they're highlighted. The yellow ones are actually corrections to the tentative budget that we originally presented, and blue is new information that we just changed. It's there to review in your packet. I don't know if there's specific ones you want to question or just go through all.
Let's start with questions. Any questions for Andrea based on what we've reviewed and what she's included in our packet?
I will state, we are coming back in 2 weeks. We'll have the certified tax rate.
Okay.
So we always have a placeholder there in the general fund. The certified tax rate comes back June 9th. And it's never precise what we have in the budget, so it just changes a little bit. The changes for rental rehab and CDBG and home actually reflect what the actual awards were. And then there's just corrections to a payroll and facilities and corrections to the energy CIP, just to kind of make it more in line.
Okay. Any other highlights?
Nope, that's all we have so far.
Okay, any questions for Andrea? This doesn't require a motion. Okay.
Nope, just presenting.
All right.
Until
Thank
next
you,
time.
Andrea.
Thank you.
Your presentation. All right, next we have an ordinance adopting a budget for Provo City Corporation for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026. In the amount of $323,326,393, presented by John Burke.
Thank you, Chair Garrett and Council. Each year, Finance and the Council kind of reviews the budget ordinance and looks at it, discusses any areas that we feel like maybe need to be adjusted or changed. I'm just going to touch on just a few points of the budget ordinance that I think are significant. First thing that it mentions in the second paragraph is that on June 3rd, and also on June 17th, 2 weeks from today, there'll be public hearings for the budget. And that will happen in tonight's council meeting. Also, it mentions here that notice of the public hearings to consider the adoption has been properly given, and I'll just ensure to you that that has taken place and is taking place. And as was mentioned by Chair Garrett, the budget is $323,326,393, and that will change slightly, reflective of some of the adjustments that Andrew just went through, and we may still have a few. And just because the budget's has so many moving parts that it's almost every year we always have slight little changes as we go through it. So that's just one thing I'd mention. Also, as we met with council staff, there are some projects that often span over multiple years. And so what we've done is we've included in the budget ordinance those items that can be carried over. So the budget's carried over. And one of the items was added this year, which is in the council's budget, is the neighborhood matching grants. And we are in full agreement with that. I think that's a good addition to the ordinance. And then one thing I wanted to talk about and get kind of the council's feel on it is last year when we presented the budget, and we have what we call as the local government disaster fund. And there's a line in there that just says, of the remaining general fund budget savings that are not carried over as described in paragraph 8 above, 20% of the maximum amount allowed to be transferred under state law, whichever is less, will be placed in the local government disaster fund. And so one of the things we wanted to get feedback from the council is whether we want to include that language in there. As we've talked in the past, we have basically through the state a maximum amount of 35% that we can of the general fund revenues that we can carry in fund balance, and we've been right around 31 to 32%. And I think it's a good practice to, rather than put that money in the disaster fund, put it in our fund balance, and then it could be utilized for a disaster or other financial things that come along that aren't foreseen, and sometimes even the purchase of property or something like that. And so we have two options. One option would be just to pull this language out, and if we got to a situation a few years where we were above that 35% or at that 35%, we wanted to add it back, we could do it. Or the other option would be just to leave it there, and then we can discuss with the council at the end of the year whether they would like to move it based on the calculation or not. So we kind of wanted to get feedback from you on that, and then we will adjust the ordinance accordingly so that we come back in 2 weeks, that would be addressed. So you want to have a little discussion about that?
My comment would be to keep it there.
Okay.
If we take it out, I'm afraid it's gonna get forgotten about by council. I already forgot about it until you brought it up, right, from last year. And so then it gives council that awareness and that option of what do we want to do with it this year? Do we have a good year that we want to stick it into that disaster fund, or do we want to, like this year, we have a crunch year with sales tax, do we want to just keep it where it's at? So I like just keeping it, that's my thought.
Thank you, Counselor Bogdan. Other inputs? Counselor Gershington? And it was the local government disaster fund, is that the one administered by the state
It's a state program.
program? And it's also very restrictive in terms of how that's used.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
has to be declared as a disaster to have access to it, or you can use some of the funds for preparing for a disaster. But to date, we have just been accumulating money, and like I mentioned last year, we didn't add to it, but it's still there. So yeah.
So just to clarify, Counselor Christensen, the fund is not administered by the state. The fund doesn't belong. It's our fund in our budget. It's a placeholder. Well, placeholder is not the right word, but it's a fund that we created to put money in order to qualify for low interest state loans during a disaster. Should that occur, but we didn't send the money to them. That makes sense.
Yeah. We're following the code and how we administer, but it's in a separate account bearing interest in that the city has.
Does the interest come back to our general fund, or does the interest go back into that account?
It adds to the disaster fund.
Oh, okay. So every year we are adding to it. whether-
We are, yep.
And the disaster has to be declared by the governor, right?
I think it can actually be by the mayor too,
Oh, so
Yeah.
we do have some leeway.
but it would need to be a disaster, yeah.
Would need to be what?
It would need to be some type of a natural disaster. It wouldn't, like, for example, an economic downturn wouldn't qualify. It would need to be something related to that.
What about a sinkhole?
Yes.
So there's a definition in
Okay.
the Emergency Management Act, which I believe
Okay.
is Title 59. So it'd have to meet that definition,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
it doesn't require a statewide declaration.
Okay.
So just for further clarification, if I'm remembering all this correctly, so we, and maybe for the benefit of those newer on the council, so when the council decided to pass this policy, so it's not state mandated, we simply opted into it, but I think the feeling that I have, and maybe others have had, is some discomfort with the fact that it's so inflexible in terms of how we ended up being able to spend it. So that's given me pause about the policy in general. You know, the council, and this is part of what you're asking us, I mean, we have the option where we could delete it entirely. What Becky's suggesting, I think, is in the spirit of, well, we passed this policy. It's probably good to be thinking about this. We've already got over $1 million in that fund. Every year, if we visit the question, we can make the decision whether or not to put into it. But we're not, according to my best understanding, obligated to, right? So we're just making a decision year to year. If we kept that language there, we're still able to say, we choose not to this year.
Yeah, and what we do is in September, what we've done in the past, in September, that's when we bring to you the carryover that the mayor's recommending and approved.
Yeah.
We out of transparency, we share that with you. At that point, we share based on where we would be, what we would add to the fund, and then we ask the council whether they want to add it or not, and if we say no, then we just move forward. Which is what happened last year.
Okay. Yeah, I like keeping it that way. And presumably it will always get triggered. It's not going to be forgotten. Like Becky's saying, if we took it off entirely, it may not be ever a discussion point. At least this is a discussion point every year that happens. We still have flexibility.
And there's another piece of the calculation that's based on net income for the general fund that we don't know till the end of the audit. And we also come back when we present the audit in December and decide whether you want to. Last year we didn't qualify, but if we did qualify, we'd come back and ask the council if they wanted to add that as well. So we can just keep that going forward if that's the council's.
What's the conversation?
That's what the council would like us to do.
And that, John, that September process is a natural
It is.
activity. It's not not like that would get forgotten. That's a natural.
We would come back regardless in September. And
Okay.
it was came back from previous councils that they wanted just to be aware. And so once and it takes a couple months to know what we're going to carry over through the year end process. So in September, we just come back to share that.
It's not like we would forget that.
No, that's coming regardless.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any other input or questions or comments? It sounds like, John, there would be support for leaving this in there and then addressing it on an annual basis in September.
Okay, we'll do that. I'll just mention a couple other things, then I'll be done going over the ordinance. There are some exhibits, okay, and the first exhibit, Exhibit A, just basically provides the link to the budget. Just letting you know that this is referring to the actual adopted budget, which is on the city's website under more info and the budgets we talked about when we presented the budget, the tentative budget a month ago. And then there's also Exhibit B, which lists capital projects budget that will be also included. It's not here right now, but we will have it when we come back in 2 weeks. And then there's Exhibit C is the pay table range. And what happened is this year, assuming the 2.5% is included in the budgets adopted by the council. The pay table was basically increased by 2.5%. And then the final is Exhibit D. And on May 20th, Andrea kind of went through the consolidated fee schedule. And that is Exhibit D. And so that will be included as well. So that's pretty much the budget ordinance. Any other questions that I can answer regarding budget ordinance? Yes.
So we just voted for a little change on the water rate. Will you be able to update it with that information?
Yes, it's very helpful for us to be able to start working on that because there are a number of moving parts that happen as a result of that, but this gives us the time that we need. So we'll have that included when we come back in 2 weeks.
So that would make a minor change to the total number, but it will certainly change Exhibit D.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep, so that change as well as the changes that Andrew just went through on the amendments. So, yep.
And just for clarification, did we decide that there would not be a separate item?
We didn't decide that yet.
Can we do that now? Is that
So
out of order?
the question, John, is when we vote on the budget in 2 weeks, I mean, you'll have the new proposed water rate fee schedule included. Whether we should separate the tier structure discussion and vote on that next week separately.
So,
It's up to the council.
Brian?
yeah, you have the ability to do that, and I think, so I guess what I would say is the default, if you do nothing, if you
Right.
say nothing is,
Right.
we will bring to you a consolidated fee schedule that has everything that you've just voted on, that you earlier voted on. So it would not be a separate vote routinely or by default. If you want it to be a separate vote, you should make a motion to have us separate that.
Okay.
The problem being, I suppose, well, if you do that, I mean, we can take out a piece of the consolidated fee schedule, we can vote on it separately, and the consolidated fee schedule with the budget can just have an ellipses in it where, for the part that we took out. The question I guess I would have is the potential problem is if you change something with regard to those rates, that changes the revenue, then it changes the whole budget. So you could only change it in a way that's revenue neutral unless you want to change the whole budget.
I mean, that's what I would prefer to do nothing then and let John integrate that information into the final draft and not have it as a separate item 2 weeks.
Definitely simplifies things.
Sure would. All right, sounds good. Anything else, John?
Nope.
Any other questions for John?
Yeah, why are you retiring on August 4th? And why didn't you check with all of us before you said? Scott just sent an email out announcing your announcement.
It is clearly the great and dreadful day. I have loved working for the city, and it was a very difficult decision, but
You've been amazing, John.
been a great journey.
It's our fault, isn't it?
How about this, okay?
It's Gary's fault.
It's my wife's fault. There you go.
Well, for her, you would give credit.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. Hopefully she's not watching right now. Yeah,
Is she gonna take all your bikes away on August 4th?
no, buy a couple more. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, we have an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding certain employee retirement programs presented by our HR Director, Daniel Softly.
You're cruising through time again.
We are,
Are we flying way ahead of our schedule?
we're 14 minutes ahead of schedule.
Holy cow.
Gary, this is the second time you've done that.
Let's move to item 5, an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding public safety impact fees. John Borbeck.
So if you might remember, but a few months ago, we made a motion and the council approved it to basically take our fire impact fee and our police impact fee and combine them into a public safety impact fee. And so that's happened. But as we were looking through and I was working with Brian and also Susie Becker, who's a consultant with Zions Public Finance that's worked with us on our impact fees. There are two documents. One's called a public safety. It's basically what's called the IFA. Okay, and then there's also a public safety facilities plan. And so what Susie did is went back and combined, because we had a separate IFA and a separate IFFP for each police and fire. So they were combined so that we can have those now as one for public safety for each of those. So that was done. And then there was also a table. And do you have the one that's a little bit easier to read? Well, if it doesn't work, I've got it, like, can share.
There's the lessons one here. I think I have more easy one.
So it's small, but what it does is it shows the police impact fee for the various different areas, and then it has the fire, and then over on the right, there's actually a combined or a total, and so that shows what the new public safety fee would be. And that way, if you wanted to be able to reconcile and go back and compare to what it was before, you can see it. And so that schedule is also one of the things that we're recommending that we include with this post so that we have that information. So what this does is it really kind of shows a complete picture of what we did several months ago, provides the documentation. Now, there's one other thing that there's a couple other things I wanted to mention is that when we recently, I think it was in February, adopted the water impact fee, culinary water impact fee. And what it had, when we've done impact fees in the past, it shows what the fee is in year 1, and then year 2, 3, and 4, and subsequent years, they adjust. Okay. And some of it has to do with debt service and other things. And so we've typically just kept the original amount. Well, here's the more complete schedule. Great. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. But when we did the water, we felt like, we're really trying to recover the costs and have the growth pay for the growth. And so in the ordinance, we approved that impact fee would adjust each year based on what the study presented. And so as we've been working on coming back to you and providing the information for this public safety impact fee, we thought it made good sense to recommend, similar to what we just did in water, having the fee adjust each year. Okay. And so this is, for example, right here, the public safety. If you took the total back when it was adopted in 2019, it was roughly $580 for a single family. Well, through the study, it now could be $636.30. Okay. And so it's gone up that much, and you see it goes up over time. And so what we're recommending is part of what we would like to do is go ahead and make this effective July 1st, and then adjust it to the 2025 rate. And then in the subsequent years, when we come back with consolidated fee schedule, we would actually provide this schedule there, and then we would make that adjustment year after year. And so it provides us better able to recover from the cost based on the study. Yes, Becky.
So the study was done in 2018?
Yes.
And it was adopted in 19. Since then, inflation's been crazy. Does this account for the crazy inflation?
It accounts for, it's a good question. And I know that there's the debt service impacts it. And I think it does account for inflation, but I could find out for sure. Now, we're going to have Susie Becker with Lions Public Finance with us, but we're a little ahead of schedule, so she's probably not online right now. But I can find that answer for you. And we're coming back in 2 weeks to see if we're recommending the council approve it in 2 weeks, and so we could discuss it then.
Because I would prefer to have current numbers in there if we could, rather than numbers that were projected back in 2019 or 2018.
Susie Becker is online.
Okay. Susie, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. And the question is, with those increasing costs from the study, is that some of that from inflation, factored in from inflation?
It was in 2018, but as you recall, all we did this time was to combine the fees. We didn't go back and change the numbers to account for that crazy inflation that we saw.
Right, but what we're proposing to do as part of this motion is rather than just keep the fee the same as it was when the impact fee analysis was done, that we would adjust it annually based on the numbers that came in from the study.
Right, but the numbers in the study, those credits, the reason they change every year, the gross fee doesn't change. It's because the credits change. Because we have decreasing years left of credits for outstanding bonds and for that type of thing. But it's not an inflationary increase. The gross fee is the same. It's, like I said, just credits made that decrease each year as we have fewer years of remaining payments. As people join in 10 years, instead of today, they'd only be paying on a bond for 10 more years instead of, say, 20 from today or something.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is just based off of like this building and.
Yes,
fire station
and I had mentioned debt.
too.
I'd mentioned
Debt.
debt, but Susie kind of explained a little better than I did. But yeah, that's basically what it's for.
So use this money for like new fire trucks and stuff like that?
You can, that's correct. If it meets it's for commercial purposes and whatnot, but yeah, there are different things. But what we're saying though is that we may have other public safety projects, could be police or fire, that qualify in the future, and we're able to collect more money based on those credits if we follow this schedule.
Right, which I agree with, but what I'm worried about, I want to be able to capture everything. So she says it doesn't really account for inflation, but those trucks and things that we would purchase with this money, they've cost a lot more than they did in 18.
So that's another good point. And one of the things that we are looking at is coming back. We'd like to come back and do impact fee studies more often, okay? So that we take those things into account. And there have been discussions about us looking at some other impact fees and working on those to come back to council. And the way you address that is doing the impact fee analysis again, okay?
So we have to do
this
this analysis.
We're getting close to that time to where we should be looking at that. And I agree with you, and we are going to follow up with that. But for now, this would help.
So is there wisdom
Some.
to say, okay, instead of passing into 2040, let's just pass for the next 4 years? So that way it gives more incentive that we make sure we do it and come back. Does that make sense?
Like to put into, you're asking if, because we've done this in other instances, if we just put into the consolidated fee schedule right now, that the fee in 2025 will be X, the fee in 2026 will be Y. We just put that into the consolidated fee schedule right now.
Well, I think that's what they're proposing, right? But it has, everything on here is until 2040. And so my hesitation to pass all these recommended figures into 2040 is I want to make sure that some kind of study comes back, because we've had quite a bit of inflation over the last 8 years.
So all you're doing is passing it for the current year.
Okay.
It would come back in the consolidated fee schedule would come back in the subsequent year, and you would need to pass that. The schedule would be the same, but you would be passing for the next year. But we're definitely not going to just sit back on our laurels and not worry about it till 2040. We realize that we need to get back and do this study, and so for sure. But it would be I think it would be prudent, and we're recommending though that rather than just sticking with the original amount that was done back in 2018, that we should do it based as the study represented.
I agree with you, but you know where I'm coming from, right?
I do.
I don't wanna say, okay. Come back to us every single year, we're giving you approval to do this, when I know that that is in no way a reflection of what we would get if we turned it back today, because that inflation's been so, I mean, it's not like we've had like a 0.5% increase every year. We've
Yep.
had drastic inflation since 2018.
Yep.
So in future years, we would have the opportunity as the council to adjust that figure, correct?
Yeah, we need to go back and do an impact fee study and review the fees, and that would take that into account.
It's important to remember that impact fees work a little bit different than other fees, right? Other fees, the standard is essentially, if we believe we have a reasonable basis to say that that fee reflects our costs and it's close, we can just, as long as we know what we're basing the fee on, we can put it in the consolidated fee schedule and we'll survive it. And even if we get challenged, we'll survive a challenge as long as we have data to show that we're reasonably close. With impact fees, there's a very specific process dictated by state statute that we have to follow. So when you say, will you have choices in the future, your choices in the future will be to approve fees that are less than the study justifies or do a new study. That's the only way you could deviate.
Okay. Okay,
We're married to these until a new study comes.
Correct.
okay. And the last study was 5 years ago,
No,
7.
It was done in 2019,
7.
so it's been about 6 years.
18 passed in
Yeah,
19.
2018. So is there a set requirement for how often we need to do those studies?
There's not that I'm aware of. Susie, do you know if there's a specific requirement?
No, you don't. Just especially when you have a significant change, you may want to do it. John, I just had one quick comment. Everyone I know is concerned a great deal about inflation. I just want to explain quickly, there are two main parts to any impact fee. There's the buy-in to existing excess capacity in a building, and then there's the new construction costs. The buy-in to existing excess capacity in a building will not change. By Utah, there's an ombudsman advisory opinion from years ago. You have to use the actual cost. So if you build a building in 2010, it doesn't matter if we did the study in 2015 or 2025, we still have to use the actual cost for that buy-in portion. But you're absolutely right. Any new costs, especially those fire trucks, have been going up like crazy. Those we could add on the cost of inflation we've seen over the past few years and what we think it would be in today's costs.
Well, I'm supportive of adopting this, so we've got a sense of where we're going to be, and then when we do the new study, we would just be updating this table. But in the meantime, the expectation would be each year until we get that new study, we know what our rates should be. And so I think that's good. That gives transparency and gives us all a plan to work with. But I agree with Councilor Bogdan that we don't want to delay doing the next study.
No, and I've been having discussions just in the last couple days about some ideas that we're looking at as far as being able to come back with you and review them more frequently. I'd also mention that we've had discussions with energy just recently that they're looking at their impact fees. We're also looking at wastewater and then even Parks and Rec. But it's a big process and it's important, and so we're going to try to get a system in place to where we talked last time about coming back just 1 or 2 a year, but we just want to make sure that we come back timely so that we address the issues that have been raised by the council.
Oh, I appreciate it. I realize it's going to be a big thing.
Yes.
But I just, just noticing the date of this and what has transpired in the last 7 years, I can't say it's unprecedented because I've heard that inflation was really bad in the 70s.
Yep.
But we really need to get on these things.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Okay. I would make one other mention in the city code in 15.08.060. We are going to come back in 2 weeks with a recommended revision that basically makes reference to this table. Okay. and the change that we're making. So we're planning on doing that.
Okay,
Okay. Any other questions for me?
okay, great. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now move to item 4, an ordinance amending Provo City Code regarding certain employee retirement programs. HR Director Daniel Softley.
They found me. So I'm here to go over a proposed ordinance change, 404-100. As part of the proposed budget, the mayor has included funding to enhance a supplemental retirement contribution for employee groups that do not participate in Social Security. So just a very quick background, Social Security, the formal title of that is actually Old Age Survivors Disability Insurance, or OASDI, which explains what that acronym is in the ordinance change. It's a federal retirement savings program that we're all very familiar with. It consists of equal contributions from employers and employees. There is a provision in Social Security that allows state and local governments to opt out of the program if they have an alternative retirement plan that is at least equal to Social Security. Utah Retirement System, URS, is such a plan. And so decades ago, long before I was here, Provo City opted out of Social Security for sworn police officer and firefighter positions. All other positions in the city have remained in the Social Security program. Now, around that time, there's a fairly equal split among Utah agencies of those who have opted out of Social Security in one way or another, and an equal number that stayed in it altogether. And so what our current plan is currently Provo City agrees to match up to 2% of what full-time employees and elected officials contribute to their supplemental 401k. So if an employee puts in 2%, the city matches up to 2%. That amount is consistent with what other agencies who also participate in Social Security offer their employees as a supplemental retirement. We've done some research over the last couple of years, and we looked at agencies that have opted out of Social Security and looking at what they contribute to 401k contributions for a supplemental. It's not surprising to hear that they contribute a little bit more because they don't have to put in the same amount for the Social Security contribution. So market data shows that agencies in Utah who do not participate in Social Security provide a median supplemental retirement contribution of 4%. So this proposed ordinance change would allow employees who do not participate in Social Security, which for us is going to be our sworn police officers and our sworn firefighters, to receive a 401k match up to 4%. The regular employee group would then still remain at 2%. The cost of doing this is approximately $282,000, and that's been accounted for in the budget proposal.
That'd be an annual cost.
And that's an annual for next year. And then,
yeah,
depending on who elects and moving forward, yeah.
So just out of curiosity, if these guys were to participate in Social Security, what would be the city's contribution? That'd be 2%, 4%, 5%, 10%?
Cost of Social Security, the employee side is 6.2%, and the employer side is 6.2% as well.
Okay. So just another curiosity question. So if you elect not, if a city municipality elects not to go with Social Security, we're saving obviously 4.2% or something like that, right? Why not just stick all 6.2% into some other type of retirement account?
Opt out altogether?
Well, are we not paying anything at all on any firefighter or police officer in Social Security?
That's correct.
So basically we're saving 6.2% of their salary by not contributing to the federal government for Social Security. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so we're only offering 4%, so we're still saving 2.2% of what we would do.
It's 2.2% less for the city can contribute if they were part of Social Security. Correct.
Yeah. So anyway, my question would be, why not just contribute? I mean, right now I get it's a budget thing, but why didn't they say, okay, because you're not contributing to the federal government for social security, now you have to contribute that 6.2% to some kind of retirement account
We'll take that same amount.
Right.
Put it in
and
the
just
retirement.
shift it.
Well,
What was the logic?
what was the logic of not doing that, or?
Yeah, I mean, of allowing municipalities not to just move that to a different retirement.
Well, I would argue if you're going to spend the 6.2%, then the advantage of opting out of it doesn't exist. If you take a look at the agencies that have done so, the median contribution is 4%. There are some that have gone that way of thinking and said, well, we're going to put the full 6.2% in towards a different supplemental contribution. But again, there's not really an advantage to do that. As far as why they made that decision, decades ago, I wouldn't be able to say that. It was a different retirement program there, for one. Back in that time, it was a 20-year public safety retirement. And I think they opted out because they could retire at a relatively young age and still earn enough in a secondary job or a post-retirement job to qualify to go for Social Security. So,
Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering this correctly, but part of the philosophy behind opting out is that you just said the city, if these employees were in Social Security, the city would contribute 6.2% to
be required to, yes.
Yes, but so would the employee.
Correct.
Right, so their salary would go down by 6.2%. So
Yeah.
some of the philosophy, as I understand it, behind originally deciding to opt out was that those employees essentially have more disposable income that they can use to plan for their retirement because the Social Security portion is not getting taken out of their salary.
Yeah, that's correct. And there's a fairly lively debate on whether or not it's an advantage or a disadvantage to be in Social Security. Brian, you just brought up a really good one. It also largely depends on where you are in your career and the type of career that you have. For a regular employee who has a 35-year retirement plan, there's not a lot of post-retirement time to earn the credits that you would need. So people would want to be in there. If you're a brand new employee who believes that, give me my money and I'll invest it in the stock markets over the next 30 years, and I think I'll do better than Social Security, they may want that type of a plan. And so I think there's a lot of factors into it. It's fairly telling that the split between agencies that participate in and out of Social Security is about right down the middle, which would reflect, I think, that debate.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Right now, this recommendation is based on what the median is of other agencies of what they're doing. Some offer none, some do the whole 6.2.
So do we offer a different retirement plan for police and fire?
We do.
So they do get a retirement plan after 20 years.
They get it after 25 years. So if you were hired before, and I always get them confused whether it's 2010 or 2011, but before there was tier 1 and tier 2. If you're a tier 1 public safety employee, you're still on a 20-year retirement plan. Anyone hired after that date, when tier 2 came into event, it's a 25-year plan. So pre-tier 1, tier 2, sorry, it was a 20-year plan for public safety and a 30-year plan for regular employees. Now it's a 25-year and a 35-year plan. So they get that still, in addition to, if you're in Social Security or if you're out of whatever the 401k contribution is. So,
They have a choice.
You can take a tier 2 employee can choose to have all of that money put into a 401k contribution, or they can have a defined plan where they get a defined benefit. We're talking about the supplemental contribution, where we're saying outside of your regular Utah retirement system, we want you to be saving money for the future. That's the purpose of the matching plan, is to incentivize employees to put away for the future. As Brian said.
What percentage access that?
What percentage? I don't know off the top of my head. There is a 1-year waiting period for employees, but I would say most, so probably around 75%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's
So
quite a
you have
few.
quite a few taking
Yeah.
advantage of supplemental retirement.
Yes, I've always encouraged people, if the city is willing to match your employee contribution, they should take advantage of that.
And just ask the obvious, and if this isn't approved, what do you see as the consequence?
I'm sorry?
And if this isn't approved or we don't go forward with this, what do you see as the consequence?
It's become more of a topic over the last couple of years, and maybe that's my own fault because I brought it up about 2 or 3 years ago, put it on people's radar. But if we don't, I mean, we are lower than what other agencies contribute for those who do not participate in Social Security. So the reason for this is to allow us to, in the public safety realm, to become more competitive. And so if we don't do it, then we just accept the current competitive status where we're at and we move forward with that. And so the advantage of doing it is we become more close to the market and it takes it off the table as far as a decision for coming to work for Provo.
And if we pass the budget in 2 weeks, this happens. It's
Yes,
already-
so the mayor has, as part of the budget decisions that she made, this is one of the things that she wanted to go forward with, and so that's already included in the budget.
Any other questions for Daniel? All right, thank you,
Okay.
Daniel.
Thanks.
For the presentation. All right. Next, we have a resolution appointing Danny Mitchell as Provo City Constable to serve a 6-year term. To be presented by John Gorga again. John, we're just going to keep you on the agenda to delay your retirement.
Ready to go. So, number of months ago, we were contacted by Bob Connor, who has been the city constable, and he requested that he no longer be the constable, and as a result, the city started a process for selecting a new constable. A nominating commission was established by the municipal council, which included Councilor Whipple, Brian Jones, Judge Steve Schreiner, Judge Rick Smith, and Chief Troy Beebe. A request for proposal was drafted and then reviewed by the nominating commission, and then it was posted on our Bonfire state approved electronic bidding system. We posted it for 2 weeks, and we had 2 bidders that responded. And then we met as a nominating commission. I would mention that tried to come up with a unanimous date. But Judge Schreiner and Judge Smith were not able to be there at the meeting. But they reviewed the 2 responses and came back and proposed that Danny Mitchell, who's be the Provo City Constable, and I would mention that Danny Mitchell works for the same company that Bob Connor did. I would also mention that I provided the information to both Judge Smith and Judge Schreiner, and they both recommended Danny Mitchell as well, be the city constable. And so we're coming back with that proposal. I would mention that Danny's here. And if you would like to have him come up, you could ask him a couple of questions, or you could have him share a little bit of his background. But we're recommending that this take place in tonight's council meeting. It's on the agenda, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilor
I
Christensen.
just had a question for Rachel. Any comments you'll be grateful to be part of this?
Yeah, so it was really good that we went through the full RFP project or process. There were 2 responses, which honestly surprised us. We didn't know that anybody else would try to compete for the services that they've been offering you. The court security, the transport, and things like that. Looking through the responses, they were in 2 very different categories. So it was an easy decision on that front. The other thing that I will say is that I've talked to several people who've worked with Danny and just glowing recommendations. And so I felt comfortable not just accepting that RFP, but nominating Danny to be a constable. and I'm excited that he's here so that you can grill him yourself. I think that will be good. But yeah, it was a good process, and it was also nice to see what our other options are so that we can feel good about the course that we're on.
I have the same question for Brian. Brian, you were on the commission as well. Thoughts, input?
I would echo everything that Rachel said. I thought that the process was useful. I would mention, in case this thought had occurred to anybody, I think it was mentioned once or twice in some of our previous discussions, but not only did we review the 2 RFPs, but Chief Beebe, who was on the commission, was specifically asked if he had any interest in the police department taking over the constable service and the court services. And he said, because that idea, that's the other option the city has. And he said, well, I don't have the manpower to do it right now, and hiring the manpower would be more expensive than the contract that we're being offered. So I just throw that out there to say that we explored that option as well while we were talking about it. And we've also had some in post that meeting, I've had some interaction with Jason Kremers, who's the head person from All Pro Security right now. That's also been a good discussion and process, because we're looking to use that to make some improvements to the contract that we have for the court services that they're providing. So I think it's been useful, but I would say also that everything Rachel said about the clear-cut decision is accurate.
Yeah, well, and it was good too that the contract that we have with our current service provider was going to be expiring like next month anyway. And this just gave us another opportunity to review that and to clean it up. So that was also a fortuitous thing.
And I guess I would throw out, because this is always one of the issues with RFPs as I think about it. It's important to know, not only were we convinced that it was the best quality and the best response as far as services, it was also the best response with regard to price. So,
yeah.
And I would just add a couple other things that, first of all, Danny has been working as a deputy constable and working directly with Provo. And we also have Rhiannon Newton, who is here, who is the Justice Court Administrator, who works very closely with the constable and with the security service they provide. So she's here if you had any questions. And then what we're recommending is that it's a 6-year appointment. And so we're just recommending that we make it effective on July 1st. And that way we'll be back in 6 years for a reappointment or decision what we want to do. So with that, happy to have you chat with Danny, or anything I can answer.
Well, and one more thing is that we can appoint Danny a constable, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything with Bob. So we can have more than one constable appointed at a time. If Bob chooses after we appoint Danny to resign or not, that's up to him, but it really doesn't matter to us.
Yeah, and I know the conversations that we've had with Bob is that he is kind of in a stepping down as in the form of retirement. He still has some involvement with the company, but his day-to-day services he's no longer doing. So,
but if he still wanted to go serve papers on somebody,
there you go.
He could do that. Right, Danny.
Yeah, Danny?
Come on up, Danny.
Okay. Show me right here.
That's fine.
Okay.
Hi, Danny.
Hi. Appreciate the nice things you said about me.
Yes, so I understand you've been working with All-Pro for what, 11 years or so?
8.
8 years, all right. And yeah, why do you want to do this?
You know, if I can get that answer back to you in a couple of years. This wasn't the plan. For here, I worked for the sheriff's office. Ironically, as an adult, I developed adult onset epilepsy. First time they're like, oh, it was heat stroke, you're good. Still had to wait to drive. Got where I could drive again, got back out on the road, had another seizure. And then they're like, well, we'll let you work in the jail until you get it figured out. I said, jail? I'm not not corrections officer. So I left, moved back up here, saw the neurologists. Ended up going away after about 6 years. Started working for Bob during that time. One thing just led to another one. It's just a good fit.
And Bob certainly like built that company and some pretty big shoes to fill. But you've been with him 8 years, you said?
Yeah.
So how do you feel you want to build on what Bob has taught you?
So one thing that Bob has that I don't think anybody can argue with is his work ethic. I don't know anybody that can keep up with that. Guy, when he's on vacation in Hawaii, he's on his laptop working the whole time. And while I've been with Bob, I've slowly moved through the ranks and I've focused on just the courts. That's my baby. That's all I really focus on for the most part. So I just want to keep making it. We moved a long ways along with our training, getting our deputies trained, and getting a better service for the courts. I just plan on continuing that.
So, how many deputies will you need?
That's a tough question. We have a lot of them that are part-time. Some of them are going to school, some of them are going through the second block of the academy. So I think right now we have 40 something that we have.
And will all those switch over to work with you, or do they stay with Bob's company?
No, they'll come with me.
Okay, so it's not like you need to go find 40 new people.
No, everybody. I've made sure to be as transparent as I can with everybody, because the last thing I want is people worried about their job, and so I've been pretty clear, and they're all excited for it.
Okay. And while I love hearing that that it's a good economic deal for the city, I also worry about contractors being able to make the money they need in order to continue doing it.
Sure.
Do you have any reservations about your ability to make the economics work?
No, we've got a pretty good system down. I can't recall the exact verbiage in the contracts, but I think it has it in there where we can submit it for an increase just for cost of living. We know that we're not gonna become extremely wealthy off of this contract or these 4 contracts. That's why they chose to have me take this over. Cause you gotta have a little bit of a passion for it, or it's just not.
No.
Most people are in business to make as much as they can. Or I'm not in that boat. I can focus on, I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. So you'll be doing this full time.
Mm-hmm.
And have you been doing it full time?
Yeah.
Great. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to our vote tonight.
Thank you.
Leanne, any comments or questions or?
So, I appreciate the fact that it's so hands off, especially with Danny. We don't ever come into the office and have those security guards and wonder, oh, where are they? I don't have to track my work down. It's just completely hands off. We have an issue. I talked to Danny, it's taken care of. We did it.
And you've been working with Danny for several years now.
So we've had APS contracted since we opened in 2007. Danny's been with us. I guess 8 years, I thought it was longer.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you,
Good.
John.
Any other questions for me?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we have a presentation regarding Provo Police Victim Services. Will be presented by Lee Fair Victim Services Coordinator. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
My name is Estrella, and
thank you for making the time to let us present here. This is a required VOCA presentation, so this will be the last time you'll see us in this 2024 to 2025 grant year. But yeah, we are 3 of the VOCA funded advocates out of a team of 4 in total. We used to be 7, but due to loss in funding, we are down to 4. But yeah, thank you for letting us be here and present to you guys a little bit about our team and what we do. This is okay. I am Kim Thane, and I am the new Victim Services Coordinator. Lee Foray has retired again, and so unfortunately she has left us, and I have taken her position as of today. So but
I'm sorry, could you mention your name one more time?
Kim Thane.
Kim, thank you. Kim.
But I've been working with this team for quite a while.
Okay.
We thought we'd familiarize you a little bit with the qualifications that are required to be a victim's advocate for the police department and for Provo City. So we require a bachelor's degree in a social science. And so most of us have psychology or sociology. Many of us have an emphasis on criminal justice, or something that is closely related. The state requires a minimum of 40 hours of trauma-informed training, and that is required at the outset when we begin as an advocate. And then there is a required or strongly recommended 24 hours annually that is also of ongoing training. And so this is something that we are scrambling to maintain, because the VOCA grant that we are representing today used to provide us several $1,000s each year for training. And a couple years ago, with the cutbacks, we lost all of our training funds. And so especially the 24 hours every year we're always looking for ways to pay for that training. We have to have the ability to be on call. So the 4 of us that we have on our team right now, we are on call for 1 week a month. And so that's a 24-hour a day. Just if we happen to be in the office, great. But most of these calls come in during the night, and we're also available, on weekends. So there's a bilingual requirement that is specific to this grant. At least one of the individuals covered on the grant has to be fluent in Spanish as well as English. And so that is with the 2 positions that are fully covered by the grant, one of them has to be a Spanish speaking. We are fortunate to have 2 fluent Spanish speakers right now. And then there's also a very intense background check that is required for all employees of the police department, and we are no exception. So that's a kind of an invasive and lengthy process, but it's something that we have all gone through in order to serve it as a victim services provider. So, Denise?
My name is Denise, and I'm just going to be talking about some of our cases that we have. We deal with a variety of different cases, but this is probably the most public case that we have going on right now. Dr. Broadbent was an OBGYN who sexually assaulted a lot of his clients. Right now we have over 100 cases that are being screened, hopefully by county, and only 1 of those cases has been prosecuted. But we have likely provided resources to all 100 of those clients that have dealt with this. And the majority of our victims are Spanish speaking. So luckily, again, we have 2 Spanish speaking advocates, so we've been able to help them out with that. This is a domestic violence case that we recently had. The defendant had 3 prior domestic violence convictions and has managed to get them all expunged. So due to this new charge that he had was not enhanceable,
and he has the potential to get it expunged again, which puts a lot of our people out in the community in danger as he just keeps getting these convictions. 2 children were present and aware of the abuse that was going on, and one of the kids asked for a full protective order. He actually wrote a statement against his dad. He's 11 years old, so he wrote a statement against his dad and how he doesn't ever want to see his dad again and wanted this protective order against him. This is a harassment case that we had. The client was being divorced by her ex-husband. Estrella helped write the civil protective order, and the children were included. And this is really important because the husband actually tried to remove the children from school and take them out of the country. And once they're taken out of the country, we have no control over that. So getting that protective order in place was super important. So that same day that it happened, Estrella was able to get that protective order written and submitted to the court. And the schools were added in order to prevent him from entering the premises and having the ability to take them out of school.
So yeah, thank you for giving those examples. That's just a glimpse of some of the type of cases that we deal with. But here just a list of some frequently asked questions. So first question, what will happen if we don't have this grant? Well, we lose funding and we lose jobs and we lose the potential to support the citizens or the residents of Provo. And our services are confidential within the police department. Again, we are system-based advocates, which means specifically like working with a special unit victim, like special victims unit, we need to collaborate with the detectives and collaborate with the investigators and everyone involved. So we are confidential, but if there are things that our clients express to us that could support their case, then we will share that with assigned detectives. And then we do, when we refer our clients out to community resources, a big one is the refuge, that their contact information is given out to them as well, obviously with the permission of the client. And then is there a cost for our services? Nope, our services are completely free. And can we help with legal processes like protective orders or court accompaniment? Yes, that is a big part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. We also have a court advocate who isn't here right now, but we go to court weekly and we support our victims and clients that way.
I have a question for you. So yesterday, I talked to the Baca guys up at the car show, and they said they have all these nicknames on their stuff, and they said that a lot of times what they will do is the other attorney, defense attorney, will go ahead and they will subpoena the family member so that no one can be in the courtroom as a child testifies or something. Do you guys ever have that kind of a problem where you guys get subpoenaed so you can't be there for support?
Kim, do you want to address that question?
We are not subpoenaed very often because we primarily are working with a victim. Every once in a while, and in most cases, if there is a criminal case, then the city or the county attorney is serving basically as their attorney. Every once in a while, we will be contacted and asked for input. There are rare occasions where we could be subpoenaed, but it doesn't happen very often. But there could be, I am aware of times when a defense attorney has attempted to subpoena an advocate or someone that has provided services to a victim with the intention of discrediting the victim. But again, that's rare, and of course, we're going to be truthful about what we would testify to. But in that case, we very rarely, anything that we report or that we keep for our own records is public record anyway. And so, you know, we document things in Spillman, which is part of the police documentation system, and those can all be grammar requested. So those police reports usually become part of a court case anyway. So they don't usually want to talk to us because very rarely are we
Providing
helpful
information.
to a defendant's case.
And then do you guys ever get, like, I know the police force, they're really good at helping the officers get therapy if it's needed because of all the trauma that they see. Do you guys access that same kind of thing?
We do. And there was a policy where we're required to have a review annually. And we have those same services provided to us. And they're accessible at any time. And there have been times that we have taken advantage of that. We're also encouraged to do things privately if that's a more comfortable situation for us. But yeah, it's something that is encouraged often.
Because you guys see a lot of trauma. You guys deal with a lot of things that you have to process, like a 911 operator, a police officer.
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for your question. So does someone need to report to police to receive services? No, they do not. We are here to support all residents of Provo, regardless if they make a report or not. And we can refer them out to community resources if that's something that they're not comfortable with. And do we offer help for children or teens who are victims? We do, yes, but we don't communicate with children or victims under 18. But when it comes to cases of, like, if there's a safe parent, like, we'll communicate with a safe parent. But if there isn't, then we let DCFS or the Children's Justice Center. And then we also work very closely with the juvenile court advocate as well, and work with them together to support any minor victims. But yeah, do you guys have any questions for us?
What's the statute on file maintenance? How many years are we required to keep files of those that you provide services to? Is it a standard 7-year requirement, or do you know?
You know what? I don't even know. The system that we use as advocates, for as long as that has been in place with the department,
Those files.
we have access to that still from.
And that goes back.
The beginning. My guess would be at least 10 years.
Okay.
And the benefit to that is, unfortunately, we do work with people more than once. And so if they have a history that we need to be aware of, or if they have previously worked with an advocate that is still working with the city, we want to put them in touch with that same advocate because they already have that relationship. So those ongoing records are really helpful. But I do not know what the legal requirement is.
And then one of you mentioned, I can't remember if it was you, Kim, the reduction in force from 7 to 4 over the recent years. Are you able to keep up with the workload? Are you looking forward to the time that grant can increase so you can add more advocates? Any comments on that?
It's kind of 50-50. It's if we add grants, it adds work, and it's less time that. So like in my position, I'm a trained advocate as well as serving as the supervisor. So I can take cases and work with clients in addition to maintaining the grants.
Okay.
But maintaining the grants does take a great deal of time.
I see.
And so if we had someone that was solely working on grants, that might be more beneficial. But I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to depend on grants.
Right.
That would be our best case scenario, because it does take up quite a bit of our time. But that is one of the reasons why we have fewer advocates now than what we did. at one point we had a grant that was, part of a SOCI program, which was the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. That focused, it was federal funding that focused on getting all of the sexual assault kits tested. And so that advocate focused on sexual assaults and only worked with victims over the age of 11. So it was a very focused grant. The state of Utah does not have a backlog of kits to test anymore. So for the most part, throughout the state, that grant has gone away. And so that is one that we had in the past, but we don't have anymore. And so that was the loss of one of the positions that we had.
Okay.
And we no longer have an administrative assistant, so we try to kind of balance that. And so we do have one city funded position. We actually, the supervisor is city funded. And then we do have another city funded position that we will try and balance all of this out as we've kind of changed roles just as of today. And then we've got 2 VOCA positions, and then our court advocate is funded by the CDBG grant.
Okay.
So that's how we're funded. So 3 of our 4 full-time advocates are funded by grants.
Well, this semi-annual presentation is helpful to the council, and we appreciate the great work and service that you provide in our community. Any other questions or comments, Councilor Christensen?
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure, so what's the specific grant we're talking about here? I must have missed it in my pre-work, or I wasn't sure what the.
Victim of Crime Act, VOCA.
Okay, so that's yeah, I'm not sure how much of the budget. Okay, so how much of the budget is that?
Right now, I believe that the 2 positions, we have 2 fully funded positions that are funded by VOCA. Right now, the city funded position is a 25% match. But my understanding is that at the beginning of the next fiscal year, that the grant cycle, that match will be covered by somebody else.
Okay.
And so that it will just be those 2. So it's these 2 ladies right now. These are the 2 that are fully funded by VOCA. So one of them is required to be the fluent Spanish.
Okay. Well, I mean, as a council, we've made public safety priority. I mean, there's just no question about that. So if public safety is a good thing, victim advocacy is God's work. I mean, we approve the right kind of firefighter equipment, the right kind of police equipment, and those are all really good decisions. This is something that we should, whether the funding goes away or not, we need to find a way to make this happen. So I do get concerned when I hear about the numbers going down. Delighted that we've got 2 bilingual victims advocates. That's huge. So I just wanted to go on record to say this is a priority for me. And if we don't have the resources we need, let's find those resources, because these victim advocates, I've experienced the benefit that this work has been doing, and I just want to make sure I'm all in to support, just as I am with public safety. This is no different for me. I would go to the mat for police, fire, and for the good work you're doing as well.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. And we recognize the importance of what we do, but it's nice that
Well,
to hear
we
that
also,
you also recognize
no
that.
matter how talented you are, if there's not enough of you, that doesn't work. Just like we need enough firefighters.
Yes.
No matter how talented they are. You can't cut the team in half, do the same kind of work, same kind of coverage.
Yes. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I just want to thank Craig for that. This is work that saves lives.
Yeah.
And I've worked with families where victims advocates have 100% been instrumental in getting protective orders and things that save people's lives. So thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah, I'll fight this with you.
You see this first.
I see this all the time. I work in family law. So that 7 down to 4 really concerns me as well. If there were to be a proposal from our police department to fund more of these positions, there are at least 2 members of the council who would be receptive to finding the money for that.
Absolutely.
And you are good and you're well qualified, but you cost less than police officers do. And you do a different kind of service that, people who have been very traumatized need that kind of care and guidance through the system, and it's invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you making time for us.
You're welcome. Thank you again. We'll look forward to another presentation down the road. Okay, thank you. We'll break now and reconvene at 3:30.
Recording stopped.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Recording in progress.
All right, John, right. We welcome you back. We'll continue our council work session with item number 8, which is the resolution approving a lease agreement with PNC Bank for 80 electric golf carts over 5 years. It's been presented by our golf manager, Greg Watson, and our division director, finance director, Dan Fall.
Thank you for having me this afternoon. I actually have agenda item 9 as well, so I'll just speak to both of them while I'm here. Every 5 years, the council or the golf course tries to renew our maintenance fleet, which is our mowers, rollers, things that are used every day and take quite a wear and tear on them. So number 9 is addressing that, and I just wanted to thank council and your staff for letting us sneak in here. We went out to RFP. We received a really good interest rate from Zions Bank, but they had one stipulation that we present in between the 2 council meetings, or that we sign in between the 2 council meetings. So thank you, staff, for letting me come tonight and present again. So that's the urgency behind it. This first one is, as we were just talking about, the lease for electric carts. So over the past couple of years, we've been trying to transition the golf course to electric carts. One of the first steps to doing that was to build our barn, which is now completed. And in doing that, we can now transition to electric carts. Second part of the resolutions, like I said, is our transition to some new equipment for our staff to be able to provide the best services. The most important part, obviously, is all of these lease agreements and lease payments will be paid through golf course revenue. We're not expecting to see, in fact, with the golf carts, it's the exact same amount that we're paying now. It will transition a little bit over time as we get into the electric carts and transition out of the gas carts. And then with the mowing equipment, that lease payment is up a couple $1,000s, which is fairly impressive considering interest rates and how much everything has changed in the last 5 years. So any questions?
And I might have missed this. The difference between leasing and purchasing?
It just allows us to be able to pay. It's like buying a car. So instead of paying for it upright, we can pay for it over a 5-year period.
And
correct, yes. So we have the option to buy at the end, and Dan can probably speak a little bit to that.
And so what I'm just thinking of, and then maybe you can answer, I'm just thinking of the citizen thinking, why are we leasing? Why aren't we purchasing? And I buy my cars. Who wants to get fleeced on a car? So just help me with the logic there.
Yeah, so there are actually 2 different types of leases we're talking about here. The golf cart, I would compare it to a lease on a vehicle, where you pay essentially for the period, the amount of vehicle or depreciation or use of the vehicle over the time that you have it. And then at the end, you can do one of 2 things. We can turn it back into the leasing company and start a new lease with new golf carts, and/or we have the option to buy the golf carts at fair market value at that point in time. So that's how the golf cart lease is working. For the golf course maintenance.
And actually, my question was the delta between that leasing scenario and just purchasing and financing.
I don't have numbers on outright purchasing of the vehicle, of the golf carts. Do you know what the total value is of the golf carts at the beginning?
I think you would be somewhere near I think you're 7,000 per cart, or I think they might even be at 8,000 per cart right now, and at 80 carts would be the upfront cost.
Yeah, and what I'm assuming is that you took a look at buying versus leasing the finance chart, and that this is clearly the best way to go. I was just wondering what that delta is.
Yeah, and I don't have the delta. We would have to calculate that.
And there may also be intangible reasons. I know, like with the fire trucks, there was logic beyond just the financing. So I was just wondering.
I think one element, especially with both pieces of equipment, right? You're using them every single day in and day out for 5 years, and at the end of them, they're pretty beat up and they're pretty used. And so to be able to just transition into new equipment And having the option to buy, you know, at $1 per piece of equipment is usually what it ends up being. And it allows us to continually provide new carts and new equipment as we go through, rather than being stuck, you know, in a system with 8 years, maybe on a golf cart or something like that. Five is actually a little bit longer, but I think financially that's where we want to sit. A lot of courses do 4 years, 3 years and stuff on theirs, but 5 has seemed to work out really well for us in the past. And we've never had electric carts too. So this transition is certainly new, but awesome, and continuing our sustainability efforts as well. So
I think the lease approach helps too from a budget perspective.
Correct.
Spreads it out over time. But it also gives us the option to own it at the end of the lease if we want, or if the equipment's not something we want to keep, we have the option of returning the golf carts and replacing them with something newer.
Councilor Bogdan.
So why not just replace half of the fleet at a time every 2.5 years? Why do it all?
Like I said, you could do that. Most changes in golf carts are pretty significant year to year. I think we just want to continue to provide the best. And so we have a great mechanic, we have a great staff. We can keep those carts looking good, being new, but they do have a lot of hours on them. From a financial perspective, I think that the golf course revenues can cover those changes every year. And like I said, once you get to 5 years, that's probably the end of the life cycle.
But if you were to do half of your fleet right now, half of your fleet in 2.5 years, you would have a new fleet, at least half of your fleet would be new every 2.5 years, right? You're not sticking with these golf carts all 5 years, you're rotating them.
Are you asking from a financials perspective?
For any perspective, just say, right, that's lease versus buy, why not split them up and do half at a time, half every 2.5 years? Why are we doing all 80 carts at once?
I think it just makes it easier. Certainly right now, that's something we could look at in the future. Right now, having half an electric fleet and half a gas fleet would be very challenging. But getting into the electric fleet, we could certainly look at options that we have going forward.
I guess the thing that I'm getting at, probably what I'm getting some credit, is that maybe, I mean, we seem that we have just a pattern that we're doing just because this is what we do. You know, maybe we could look at things and see if it makes sense to do that, or if it doesn't make sense to do that, instead of just doing what we always do.
Sure. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, at 5 years, especially on mowing pieces of equipment that are going out daily and taking a beating in a normal way. It's not like our staff is being abusive. You get to a point at the end of that life cycle where it might seem as this is just us, you know, coming back every 5 years and saying that's just kind of how we have it built in. But certainly looking at splitting those pieces. In fact, in this new equipment lease, on your note, we don't have fairway mowers, so we're continuing with our old fairway mowers. So it is starting to split on our turf side for sure. That kind of answered that a little bit.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Sure. It's something we can look at for sure in the future. Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't make sense, but you know, maybe it does. It does make sense. Maybe your mechanic, you know, would have to learn a different golf cart, and maybe that doesn't make sense because then there's training for a different golf cart that's better to do it in 5 years.
In this example, for sure, right? But with the electric and gas.
Right. But yeah, it's just.
Yeah, we can look at it for sure. That's something to look at. Absolutely.
One of the factors I would mention is that when you look at the RFP that we did for the golf course maintenance equipment this time and compare it to the RFP that we did for the fire trucks, for instance, we got, I think, about 8 responses for the fire trucks. We got 1 response for golf course maintenance equipment, and for 2 reasons. One is lenders don't really like the collateral. As Brett mentioned, this equipment gets worked pretty hard, and so they're not so excited about the collateral. And then on top of that, the amount that we did for the maintenance equipment was just over $500,000, and that starts to get to be the bare minimum, that we can, go out and secure financing on a tax exempt basis, and get any kind of response.
Yeah, that makes sense to me there. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm very supportive, especially because you're going full electric. I mean, those, as much as I would love to see that happen in many other parts of the city, the small combustion engines, which I assume those little golf carts are, right?
Correct, yes.
Those are the worst emitters of
Sure.
pollution. So I think this is a really smart thing to get it over with, get it all done, get it, and they're gonna be much, they also have better records in terms of maintenance.
Correct.
So
Much better ride, much better
Yeah.
user experience. And I will mention that the John Deere mowers that are coming have a hybrid element to their reels, and so they're electric reels. We're trying to get there. I know I showed you guys the Firefly when we came down to the golf course. It's I would venture to guess, not on a pattern, but in 5 years or shortly close to that we will probably be coming back with fully autonomous equipment across the board in terms of our maintenance facility areas. So they're very close, very affordable. I know that John Deere, which we think of in terms of their industry leading in farm equipment, they've really stepped up their game in golf equipment. And from what I understand, both John Deere and Toro are about a year away from having their fully autonomous fleets that will go out. They're all electric, all autonomous, and that's what we want from a standpoint of several reasons. So
autonomous meaning
no rider, all electric. So can mow in the dark and do some other stuff. So that's the one that we demonstrated last fall. Yeah. So that was for a fairway. A greens mower looks kind of like a Roomba, right? It just goes back and forth and kind of has a babysitter that would walk along with it and move hazards and stuff like that. So it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of years. That's for sure. Yes, right. We talk about it every day and how everything is evolving. So we're excited for that.
Great, thank you, Brad.
Thank you very much.
For your presentation. We'll look forward to seeing you again tonight. All right, next we have item 10. An update regarding reimagining code enforcement presented by zoning administrator Scott Thompson. Hello, Scott.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come back and talk some more about code enforcement. So we'll go right into, so we've talked a few times about comparing data from the county to the records that we have. I think last time I met with you, I talked about the spreadsheet that I had of over 18,000 records that we had narrowed down that had a mailing address different from the property address itself. I was able to do some data comparison. We found, sorry, I'm saying it backwards than what I have it in my mind. We were able to bring that down to about 12,000 lines that don't have, or that we know for sure don't have rent. Sorry, I'm confusing myself as I'm saying this. So we've narrowed it down to 12,000 lines that we're still clarifying the data, whether or not they actually have licenses. The others we were able to split out that we know they do have licenses. So there's a number that we do. Looking at those, running reports in our system, I'm finding some of the way that addresses are listed on rental dwelling licenses are in there in a way that we actually have to go manually license by property to verify whether or not that actually is listed on a license. So I've had to slow down a little bit to really verify, so we're not sending letters to people that we know actually do have a license. But I'm at a point now where I have a few hundred that I'm going to start sending letters out this week to letting them know, hey, we think you might be using this property as a rental. You need a rental dwelling license. If you are, here's how to apply. And so that's going to start going out this week for those. And as we keep going through the data, we'll continue sending out those letters and managing the license applications as they come in.
May I ask you a question, Scott?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So Having all the data inherently isn't either good or bad. If you had 1 million lines that were actually accurate, having that in and of itself isn't good or bad. What's good or bad is if it helps us actually catch people and violations. So my interest would be, what's the difference with that data? And I know you're just sending them out now. I'm just saying, as you come back and report, I'd love to see zeros behind the kind of, enforcement you've been able to do, instead of like 8 in this neighborhood and 4 in that one. Like, we should be able to see a big impact. Now, I know you're just starting, but that's what I'm anxious to see, is the impact in terms of what we've been able to do and how that's impacted.
Absolutely. And that's my intent with this, is I'm going to keep track of each of those and see, okay, these ones have come in with license applications. These ones we haven't. So we're going to do enforcement on that. And I'm going to keep very detailed information on that, so I can report to you guys on my reports where that is and how many, so we can see those, hopefully extra zeros on the enforcement side of things. Speaking a little bit about the county, there's some things that we've been doing with code enforcement and other agencies or other departments within the city, is talking about ways that we can work together to enforce on some of the more difficult and strenuous issues that go on in the city. And we've talked through some different opportunities that we can work together, and we've now come to a pretty good path forward, we think, in working with them, coordinating with them, and reaching out to property owners that are having issues that the county health department may have the better tools to at least investigate, and then we can work through the enforcement side on our end to address various issues. And these are, mainly businesses with hotels and motels, not the rental dwellings that this is specifically talking about. And the next item on the agenda, we're talking about some things that are going to help address that as well. But there's just kind of a touch of some of the things that we're doing in addition to this. Yes.
Good question about that. Does that involve some of the Northeast foothills as well? Because I know there have been in the past, and Bill's aware of some of this, some of the adjacent lands that are county lands. We've had code problems that those residents have not been able to get the county to respond to. They're kind of a little enough on the border that they've had a difficult time in some cases getting either the Provo police or the county police to respond to. In some cases, these are not code violations. We're talking about like illegal behavior, but some of it's code related, I think.
Right.
Just curious if
our conversations haven't been around that specifically. We've been focusing more on hotels and motels because of some very specific issues that have come up over the past few months that have been difficult to address and coordinate between the county health department and us. But
I thank you for that. I had one other question that might be a little bit out of left field, so I apologize if this could be a further conversation. But I was recently made aware, and I haven't been able to track this down, but to verify any of this, but that there was a $10,000 fine, I think in Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City, for illegal rentals, illegal ADUs. $10,000 fine seems like that gets a lot of attention to people in terms of compliance. Have you heard of anything like that? Is that
I don't know that I've heard of that specific instance. I've heard of pretty hefty fines. With the adoption and the implementation of our civil fines, we have some properties that we're still enforcing on that have racked up a pretty substantial total fine that's
could be even more than
comparable.
Theory.
So, I mean, and then the adoption of the changes that we made to those fines, as they get implemented, that'll just help increase
I just
that
said an
pressure.
anecdote that might be useful. It was in conversation with someone who was contemplating, figuring out how to rent their property. And that was such a fine or firm line that it was clear that that was working very, very effectively. Like nobody was contemplating trying to play with this law because the penalty was so stiff that it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, as we've talked to people through our enforcement efforts and told them one of our additional steps could be that we're gonna start charging you a civil fine. As soon as they hear that, and a daily fine, they go, oh, that could add up, I don't wanna do that. So we've had people that, you know, with over occupancy, which has historically been a very difficult thing and a lot outdrawn time-wise thing to be able to rectify, got taken care of in a few weeks. So we've seen results on both ends of the scale with implementing the civil fines. But I think it's a great tool and resource that's just adding to our ability to put pressure on people to comply with various issues throughout the code.
Have you set up regular reminders or things to have your officers go back and check on properties that were previously in violation? This could apply for, you know, over occupancy or ADUs, but also just for weeds, right? Because I know there's several properties that we finally got in contact with the owners. They took care of the weeds, and we are in growing season and now they're full of weeds again.
Yeah.
And like they need another notice sent to them.
Yeah,
Or do I just need to go in 311 and write a new complaint?
I mean, you're absolutely anyone's welcome to do that, absolutely. I've had conversations over the past couple of weeks with my staff about getting out and making sure you're taken care of, especially along the main thoroughfares where more of the public sees, but specifically within your own area, just go around and find those problem areas. And the great thing about having the staff that I have currently, they've been here so long, they know where the problem areas are in their neighborhoods. And they go out and actively pursue things. If they're missing things, please reach out, let us know that, hey, there's this one that we're missing, we need to make sure we're ahead of it.
Yeah. Because it does seem that there's some that are chronic offenders.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't seem right that we have to, as citizens, report those again and again and again.
I agree. And that's why I've strongly talked to my staff about going out and finding those properties and taking action.
What I'm saying is that we already know those properties. So if we had a Slack reminder or something saying, hey, check on this guy again in 3 months or 6 months and see if they're still good, that might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'll certainly look into some different methodology to make that happen in our city view system. I don't know if we have anything built in there, but definitely through our calendar system, we can just say, okay, I've done this. Now I'm going to set a reminder 3 months out, just go check it again.
Yeah, that would be good when a case is cleared, especially if it's something that could be recurring or is likely to reoccur, like our ADUs and weeds. It would be good to have a reminder to have your
statistical grouping right there.
Weeds. Well, we see the weeds. We see them. Well, I'll just go ahead and email my last enforcement officer on one property that is now out of compliance again and tell him to go back and check it. All right.
And we'll get on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the great thing with the civil fines, implementing that now, it's going to be, look, you either take care of it in 2 weeks or you're just going to start getting a daily fine. And hopefully, you know, for this individual, it'll be motivational to get some action done. All right, we're going to keep moving on. So the RFP on the long-term rental data gathering software, talked about this a few times. The system that the city has for doing RFPs, my understanding is it is up and running now. I've talked with a staff member in the finance department to get an account set up. I'm just waiting for that to be done so I can get the RFP loaded in and we can move forward on that. Body cameras, we've received the body cameras. They've been handed off to IS to get set up, connected with their system so that we can start utilizing those as well. And then last of all, public education, neighborhood meetings. We had a great neighborhood meeting, I think about a month ago now. That Kendra Herbert, one of my staff members, and I were able to visit and do a short presentation. We had some great conversations with citizens there. Great questions were asked. We were able to talk through it. Thank you. Appreciate it. But yeah, so we intend to be with at least one neighborhood meeting for each neighborhood district before the end of this year, so that we can at least get that conversation started. And throughout the years, we'll continue to do things like that, as well as working on some digital outreach opportunities, working with our PIO to come up with we've come up with a few ideas. We just need to work with our PIO to figure out how best to implement that through our social media outreach. And that's kind of where we are right now with our reimagining code enforcement. Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
And did you mention the body cameras too, Scott?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, it was pretty quick.
Okay, sorry.
We've received them and IS is getting them set up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott. All right, next we have an ordinance amending Provo City Code to enact the Chronic Nuisance Chapter. This will be presented by Brian Jones and others, Sergeant Lewis, Tara, and et al.
I Googled those. The confirmation.
My name, I don't. Do we have the draft? Yeah. I don't know that I am the best person to go first, so I would defer if anybody else wants to, because I think really, Bryce can probably talk to what the issue is that we're trying to resolve, and then I can come back up and talk.
Okay, sure.
We have that PowerPoint by chance? Sorry. Thanks.
I'm so happy.
It's such an awesome PowerPoint. He's excited for it. Yeah. My name's Bryce Lewis. I've been with the police department for 20 years, and unfortunately, been gone the last 2 years in patrol. So we were talking about this ordinance back when I was in COP 2 years ago, and it would have been really helpful. So I'm glad Brian asked me to go first. So it's close to my heart. Does this work?
Yes.
Maybe. Right there.
The really worn out button.
There we go. I have bad computer karma too, so. So this chronic nuisance ordinance, the reason why we wrote it, and I'm sure you guys have read it, it's basically for nuisance type properties. When I first started policing, we would go out and we might serve one warrant, maybe two, and that was enough to motivate a property owner to kind of clean up their property from the criminal activity that was occurring on it. And it just seems like we've gotten more and more property owners where now we're serving 6 warrants, 8 warrants. And it's really frustrating to the neighborhood. I can't tell you how many times when we deal with these properties, watching officers' body cameras that respond to the events, how many neighbors will come over and take out their frustration on the patrol officer who's out there dealing with the problem because they've called everybody, and solving these problems takes so long. Sometimes we haven't solved them. We've got chronic motels that have been the same from 20 years ago when I started. So that's the purpose of this, is to put some onus on the owners instead of just the people that are on the property, and give us some teeth with them to try to motivate a change. So to be designated a chronic nuisance, you would have 5 emergency service calls within 90 days or 10 within 12 months. And not every property that would have this type of designation would be necessarily designated a chronic problem. This would just really be helpful for those that are causing a lot of disruption to their community and their neighborhood. So, but that's the designation. So, and I think, so I didn't list, some of these calls would be drug calls, alcohol calls, acts of violence, threats, disturbances of the peace, prostitution, harboring individuals committing criminal offenses, party houses, and places with rodents and insect infestation. So that's the kind of call load that we'd be necessarily looking at. What I've done is I've included hotels. This is the last 2 years of some of our chronic problems. This isn't the total amount of calls that the police department has responded. This is just calls that fit that category that would fit the nuisance call. And it kind of gives you an idea. Child abuse, disorderly conduct, put domestic violence in because a lot of these people don't actually live on the property. It's between a boyfriend, girlfriend who's both are on drugs. There's a lot of violence in those types of couple relationships. Drugs, DUI, intoxication. But this kind of just shows like Skyline over there, 106 of those calls. But this basically is saying these 5 properties in the last 2 years, your police department's responding every other day to one of these types of calls, which tie up a lot of resources and money from the city for those investigations in court. And because these are the type of calls that you usually have 2 to 3 officers at the minimum respond to. So so I included Marvin's Gardens because I was really familiar with this one. This was one of my hotels that I would again love to have this ordinance. See a lot of the similar calls that they had. It was a pretty unique operation because the owners had hired a management company who were willing to work with us. I would meet with the management company every week and would go over all these cases and identify people there that were predators, that were using drugs, that were causing the problem, and we would discuss them, and they would actually help me get them evicted out. The issue came with the owners of the property would come back to the management company and say, all our rooms aren't full. And they would say, well, this is going on in your hotel. And they would say, we don't care. Our rooms aren't full. We want our rooms full. I don't care who you rent it to, but the rooms will be full. And so as a police officer, I can go out and I can arrest the drug call. I can arrest the DUI. I can take care of those. But what the frustrating part was is I don't have anything. The owners are the ones causing the problem, and I don't have anything for it. And in all honesty, a lot of these owners love to see us there because they'll rent out a hotel room and then we'll go arrest the person, and they know we took them to jail, so they'll pull their stuff out, reopen the motel room, so they'll double their money. And it just goes on and on. So it's a good kid. Yeah, and we were able to close this one down. Again, the neighborhood was excited for it. This Marvin's Gardens was kitty corner. It was the old Super 8 motel, and it was kitty corner from the BYU stadium. And they had actually started advertising it as BYU housing. So parents from California, from Washington, from all over the country were sending their 18-year-old high school graduate to this hotel to stay in because it was supposed to be BYU housing, and they're in there with people on felony probation, all sorts of stuff, like sex offense calls, just all sorts of stuff. And so they didn't have a kitchen, like they were doing their dishes out of their bathtub, so.
Is that still a hotel or is it
It is now an apartment, and they did a really good job. But that took several years to work out. And I really feel like if we had an ordinance like this, where we could have put more of a bite on the owners, because like I said, that we didn't have anything for them to kind of face the piper with, so.
In that situation, because we didn't have this ordinance, we eventually
we eventually were able to shut them down based on fire code violations and building code violations. We shut them down and got all the tenants out, and we made them go through and bring it up to code to act as an apartment building, not as a hotel. But yeah, in the absence of this ordinance, it took us so much longer to accomplish that same thing.
Now, how quickly would you have been able to do it ahead of sorts? You just.
You know what? Those guys, I think if we were able to hit them in the pocketbook, I think that they would have been a lot more responsive. I wouldn't be able to answer your question on a time frame, but when you're talking like fees every day, you know, hey, we're coming back here, we keep coming back here. And I'm sure that Brian can explain the fee process a little bit better. I do think that would put a lot more pressure on because I don't really feel like we had a whole lot of pressure on them there for a while until we really started digging into things. They just
Plus the daily civil fines would also help us put that same kind of pressure on it.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So in the case of the dance hall.
Which dance hall? Sorry.
The
I've had
bad
several.
one that they revoked the.
Fuego.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fuego Fridays.
Yes.
Yeah, would something like this be useful in something like that?
Yes, it would. And it's the same thing. We go there, and I don't know if you saw in the presentations the stats that the police department provided, but those are all, again, the drug addict, the DUI, the predator, the people fighting. You know, we didn't have any charges on him, you know, that we could apply to him, and so that would have been helpful. And that's the intent of the law is to look for that. Unfortunately, there's some people that will just not change unless they're forced to.
So, Bill, in the instance of a Fuego Fridays, would you go this route or would you go the same route that you took before with pulling the CUP? Or both? All of the above?
We probably should say that.
I would say all of the above because I don't want to, I guess, steal the thunder from my part of the presentation, but I want to set expectations here a little bit and say that we've worked really hard on this ordinance, but it is not a magic bullet. This is not an ordinance that allows us to just do whatever we want and say, it doesn't matter what your interest in your business is, and it doesn't allow us to close somebody down just because they're getting a lot of calls. What it does is it gives us the opportunity, if somebody is getting a lot of calls, to identify why they're getting a lot of calls and to tell them you must do the following in order to fix it, and then to punish them criminally or civilly for not doing what we told them to do. But in order for it to even work, we have to come up with what it is they need to fix. And sometimes that's going to be really hard to do. Just to, set expectations. Sometimes there are situations where there are business owners who have bad clients, right? And they don't know what their bad clients are doing all the time. Sometimes they do, and we think we've identified some bad actors where we think they really do. But this isn't a one step fixes everything kind of situation where passing this ordinance just means we can come in and wave a magic wand and fix all the problems. So I just want to make that clear. But it's another tool. But because it is, in my view, merely another tool, I would say what we've realized in the last few months is whenever we have a problem, we should just use all the tools at the same time from the beginning, instead of kind of going through them consecutively until we find one that works.
So is that usually successful for us? Or is that something we're still trying to experiment to figure out?
Well, I mean, it goes back to the discussion we've had a lot of. It depends on what you mean by successful, right? And by usually, there's a lot of words there to define, right? I mean, it's that old issue that we've talked about so much of the time that 5% of the people cause 95% of the problems, right? So we're very successful most of the time with, again, you've heard this speech before, but most of the time, our first attempt to fix a problem fixes the problem. In the vast majority of cases, that's the case. The problem is that those, you never hear about those because they get fixed so fast, right? And so what you hear about are the ones that are really hard to fix. And my sense from my years in doing this is that we usually get problems fixed eventually. But when there are people who don't want to comply, when they have significant monetary interests in not doing what we want them to do, it often takes a lot of pressure. And because we are not a dictatorship and people have rights, it often takes a long amount of time to apply the pressure. So take it for what it is. I think this is another tool. I think it's a very useful tool. I think it will help us solve some problems that we have had a difficult time solving faster than we have currently solved them. I don't think that that means 2 weeks from now, everything will be fixed.
We have something similar with rentals in the state code. And that's kind of what this mirrors after. If we serve a warrant on a rental and there's drugs and stuff there, we can easily send them a letter, and it basically says that it's defined in state code as a nuisance house. And basically every time we respond after that, Brian could go after him for civil fines for the cost of all the police investigations. And like Brian says, the vast majority of the time, the owner is like, I don't want that, and yeah, I'll evict them out, and problem solved. And so I think that's where this is coming from, is more the property owner now, because they don't have one for, it's kind of weird in state code. It's just for rentals and not. Yes, sir.
So why didn't we have this ordinance 20 years ago?
Oh, when I first started it, I felt like just my own history. There's a lot more of these than there were 20 years ago.
So the problem's gotten worse.
I think the problem's gotten worse.
I think the problem has gotten worse. I think that we've tried other things, and the default usually is to try the tools that you have, and then you start getting creative when they aren't working, right? But you try them first because they already exist and you don't have to invent anything new. And I would also say, again, this one is with reference to Officer Lewis's comment about the state code rentals and why didn't we copy that years ago? It really is in some ways a different situation. This is a much more difficult application because in those rental situations, you have one landlord with one tenant. And so once you've told the landlord that their tenants are using drugs, now you know that their landlord knows that they're using drugs, right? But when you go to a hotel owner and say, the people in room 5 are using drugs, and then they kick the people in room 5 out and new people will come to room 5 and start using drugs. You can't say that the landlord, that the motel owner knows that the new people in 5 were using drugs and shouldn't have rented to them because they're completely different people. So it's a much more complicated situation. And so it wasn't, I think, immediately analogous, but anyway. So we've been debating it for quite a while now about trying to get this in place. So, seems about time.
Does it work on homeowners as well? Like if you get called to like my house, say you got called to my house.
I think you could apply it
Yeah.
to a homeowner, but like I said, there's going to be a lot of conversation. It's not just going to be an impulsive response. And I was actually going to talk about a couple of private residents that might be examples of what we would do.
Well, I had one across the street from me, and we had a hard time getting him out because they did own the property. I was told it would have been easier to get him out if they would have owned it. And so I'm just curious if this is.
I think this is a good example of that. Sioux Circle was owned by an elderly lady. She bought the house in the early 80s, and the neighbors were dealing with her since she moved in. And she she had 3 or 4 special needs adults that were in state's custody that she had living in her house. That she was taking their money, you know. She was basically, anyway, we'll skip that. But she had her kids got into drugs, and then their friends would come over. So this house turned into a big flop house for the neighborhood. And so in this case, this is the last the year basically that I worked on the case. But again, I just labeled it down to those specific nuisance type crimes. But we served 4 search warrants on that house. And one of the things we noticed every time we went in there was, well, one, there was guns every time we served a search warrant. In fact, when the house was sold, I got a call from the contractor because they found another gun out in the bushes. So I'm sure that was tossed out a window, either on one of the search warrants or one of the police response. So we had guns, drugs, but there was also, they were smoking weed. And she lived in the house with them. So obviously she knew that drug use was going. We had served 4 search warrants on her house. So I think you could argue the case that she was well aware that drugs were being used, that it was a nuisance house. And it wasn't until we figured out a way to give her, we found some obscure code for a Class B misdemeanor that just happened to work on the 4th search warrant. And that's when she decided that she wanted to sell the house. And so I think that if we would have had this code sooner, she probably would have been more motivated to sell the house. But again, you talk to the neighbors, they didn't want to send their kids past the house. It was just not a good place. And so I think that one would fit in.
Where did she move?
Yeah. She moved.
I was gonna say, she's
And before we move on, since I live on this street, the whole time he's talking about going, I hope there's a chance I get to do this, because I'm just telling them there's no one else on the planet that I wanted to put on my shoulders and parade around with a victory parade like this officer right here. When we held a party and invited him to come as a street, because this was amazing. So just have to give props to the enormous effort. You know, this will be a great new tool, but Officer Lewis, and then brought in, and of course you had Tara and her team's support, and they brought in Kendra, but they changed our street, they changed our neighborhood, and we're so grateful.
Nice work. Another one was, we called it the Snow House or the Snow Motel. And very similar circumstances, another elderly lady who had her adult 50-year-old drug addict son living at the house. And it got to the point where she moved out and was living with one of her other kids because of all the problems that were going on in the house. And on this one, I did 6 search warrants on it. And so I would again argue that we probably have enough they know that there's issues but yeah, I wish I still had pictures of these calls. I'd have thrown them in. It was always interesting. Like this one, I have pictures of an officer who stepped in dog feces inside the house and tracked it outside, you know, and so it was one of those places where you cleaned your feet after you left the house. There was another lady that was hiding from us that literally just pulled the lampshade over her head and stood still in the basement. It didn't work.
But how does that work?
I know, right? Well, we tried to turn the light on. But again, the same story, the neighbors they couldn't send their kids past the house. And honestly, I have my own personal experiences. I had a house in Provo and my neighbor, it was the same thing. And I was a police officer. I had a marked car in front of my house and they lived directly next door and they were selling drugs out of it. Dang. So that's how blatant that some of these people become. And so,
So a question along those lines.
Yes.
So we've got one of those houses on my neighborhood. The neighbors are concerned about it. I don't know that we've had all of these police officer visits to it yet.
Mhm.
So should they be like taking pictures of the cars that come pull
Yeah.
up or running while they run up to
Yeah.
acquire something and then leave again?
And call us. If you see cars coming short, call us because it generates numbers for us
Okay.
to be able to identify. That's what we're looking at. like we get these calls, and those calls that I talked about earlier, like drugs or noise disturbances or whatever they are, we'll substantiate them. And so if we can substantiate them, then we can start the process of this code.
So just start calling all the
Oh,
time.
yep,
Yeah,
yep.
I literally just ran into that neighbor right before these meetings started today.
Well, and if you email me the address, I can send it to who's responsible for it, and we can start that too.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
Because I was bold enough on the one across the street and I actually took pictures of the license plates of the cars that were there and sent them into COP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just gets the ball rolling, but yeah, unfortunately, drugs are never gonna go away, and it's a huge problem. Anywhere you live, you know, it just affects everybody, so. Anyway. There are exceptions, domestic violence. If it's a domestic violence victim that keeps calling us, we don't want to use that to label them as a nuisance. We want to be able to help them. Assault, stalking, medical emergencies, and then good faith. So if we are working with a hotel or a property owner and they're calling us to report the crime because they're working with us, we don't want to hold that against them. We want them to feel like they can call. So again, that's when it comes into that substantiated claim. And then the owner, at the end of the day, we'll write a letter to them saying what we want them to change. That might be camera systems at a motel, you know, like Brian was saying, yeah, you might not know your people are there, but if you're seeing a bunch of short-term traffic coming in and out of a hotel room, you probably should have a camera system, you know, to monitor that. Or whatever that is, and they'll have 10 days to respond. So, and then fines up to $500 per day for noncompliance, all that good stuff. And there is an appeal process. Everybody agrees it's good to have an appeal process. So get some fresh eyes on it in case we're wrong. So anyway. That's my PowerPoint. Don't have any questions for me?
So when would this come to the council? In 2 weeks? Okay. Any questions or comments? Thank you, Lieutenant, for your work, Sergeant, for your work on this and good work. Yes.
You guys have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Next, we have a resolution allowing Provo to participate in the Utah Valley HOME Consortium. Presented by Melissa McNally, RDA Director. She is. Hi, Melissa.
Hi. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So this resolution will be coming before you in a couple of weeks in a regular council meeting. And just to try to give you a brief history, so that you have a better understanding of what the consortium is. This is an agreement with Provo City and other entities within Utah County. It's an agreement that we renew with HUD and these other entities every 3 years. So the entities that participate in the consortium on our consortium board are Provo City, Utah County, Lehigh City, Orem City, and we are this year adding Eagle Mountain City. And these are all cities that receive entitlement funds from HUD through the Community Development Block Grant. So years ago, when we first started getting home funding, I think that we were the only entity in Utah County, Provo City was, that received CDBG funds directly from HUD. Everyone else had to apply through the state of Utah. So when they do their formula for the home funding, we were able to get the home funding. And because we formed cooperative agreements with other entities in Utah County, we are able to get more home funding to use throughout Utah County. So the home funding all goes to affordable housing options through through any city that participates in
in the consortium. And Provo acts as it's called the lead entity, which means that we're responsible to HUD for all of this funding. We do the application process and go through the vetting and the reporting, all of the contracts and the follow-up red tape items that HUD likes to give us. So do you have any questions on the consortium or how any of that works at this point? That's kind of a very brief overview. Yeah, it is.
Melissa, can you remind me what the acronym HOME stands for?
It's not an acronym.
Oh, it's
It's
not.
just HOME. It's Home Investment Partnerships I know they have it all capitalized. So you think it is an acronym, but it's just Home Investment Partnerships is the name of the program.
Okay.
And it's all affordable housing funding for different kinds of, it provides money for rentals, for acquisition. We run a couple down payment assistance programs for Provo, one for Provo and one for the rest of Utah County with the funding currently.
It could be called affordable.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I do have a question about
Yes.
the Franklin sidewalks. Are those replacement of the existing sidewalks or are those bulb outs or
The
what is
Franklin
that?
sidewalks?
Yeah, that's just part of they keep on going through this year's.
Are you talking about the funding that the CDBG for part of our consolidated plan? That's okay, just to be clear, that's a separate issue. It's not part of the home consortium. So those are new, it's part of the safe streets to the elementary schools. So that's what our public works is doing, and that's what the committee voted on for part of the pathways to the Franklin Elementary School.
But is it bulb outs or is it? Sidewalks?
I would have to look at the application again. Kahan Shore in Public Works has been working on all of the safe streets and safe routes. So he could speak to that more, and I can check the application and come back.
We've asked Public Works 2 weeks ago and I still don't have an answer. So that's why I figured
Okay.
I'd bring it up with you.
Let me check on that, or I can reach out to Kahan, and then when they come into the night meeting, I can hopefully provide that answer to you.
Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome. Okay. Do we have any other question or any questions? Other questions on the home consortium?
Any questions for Melissa?
Okay, great.
Looks
Thank
like
you.
we're good. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks for your report and your great work.
Thank you.
All right, we'll now consider a motion to close the meeting. We have two neighborhood district officers.
Okay, so this is about a character and competence
Mhm.
issue that Rachel will be presenting.
Right.
That is an appropriate reason.
Okay,
Do we need a motion? Or can we do that for the consent?
a motion or consent? Okay,
I move that we close this meeting and go into a closed meeting that has to deal with competency and character of person or persons. Did I say
Okay.
that right?
motion by Counselor Bogdan, second. Second. By Counselor Christensen. We'll call for a vote. Counselor Bogdan,
Yes.
Counselor Garrett, yes. Counselor Whipple,
Yes.
Counselor Hanley,
Yes.
Counselor Christensen.
Yes, sir.
And I know Counselor McKay is not online. Counselor Hoban, I haven't checked to see. Great.
He's like, yeah,
Wow,
let's
you've
go.
been very patient. Thank you, Counselor Hoban. We'll close the meeting then. And adjourn. Oh.
What we need to do.
Recording stopped.
Is that decent enough to?